'Tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. And still lost. It loses a little something, but it'll serve. Loss. It's an odd one. It hits you when you least expect it. Sure, there's that initial burst when someone's just checked out, but it's the aftershocks down the line which really do the damage. It's supposed to go like this. Death, followed by mourning, followed by a return to normality. The pain recedes, the numbness fades, back to regular programming. But of course it's not the same. A chunk of your life has been gouged out and it ain't ever coming back. A blackness bubbles in the hole that's left, constantly probing, and once it's found a return route, a tidal wave crashes over you. Everything you suppressed breaks free. Loss is a large part of this merry-go-round we call life, and so it's no surprise that it's formed a basis for the stories we tell since we first started telling them. I mean, who can forget Gilgamesh and Enkidu? Orpheus and Eurydice? Liam Neeson and his various family members? Actually, I could probably forget those last few. So it's no surprise Loss has made the jump over to the freshest medium on the street, bringing with it some old problems with its treatment, as well as some novel ones just to be different. Oh, video games. Characters need motivation, some integral change to their life or world which forces them up out of their sleepy village / day job / drudgery of statehood. More often than not, a loss of some kind is this call to action, that wakening jolt which sets them out on their journey. It can be handled very well. The audience's empathy grabbed a hold of and smothered over old Billy protagonist. We become invested in their story. We want to see them succeed, to follow them on their journey. Loss, however, isn't some magic bullet, even though it might sometimes be treated as such. Investment in a story is required for that loss to hit home. We need to have at least followed the protagonist a little along their journey to know how deep this sadness cuts. It's all very well opening on a dramatic shot of a protagonist's life as they know it being shattered, but unless we see that life in its unshattered state, it's harder to empathise, except in a general way. A sort of, oh, you poor thing, empathy rather than true investment. And so we come to video games, the wonderful medium in which the player usually inhabits the protagonist of the story. And, as you can imagine, this extra ingredient in the mix complicates things somewhat. Take Max Payne. I'm sure Max used to wax lyrical about Michelle to his buddies down at the Force, but I don't really get to see that. A short cutscene, a comic strip, and boom, I'm at home. Something's wrong. Our house has been turned over and there's blood on the walls. Screams, junkies, bullets. They all blur together before coalescing into Max's dead wife and child. No! Bingo bango. Player motivation established in a New York minute, and away we go on our killing spree in the snow. The issue is video games. They're not mere vehicles for a story. They also have to be played. We are active participants, and this changes everything. When we see a film or read a book, we're along for the ride, the medium free to do character development, action, or protracted monologues as it sees fit. But in games, the player's input has to be considered. Basically, we end up with a version of Chekhov's gun, but instead of it being hung on the wall, it's in the hands of a junkie called Twitchy Phil. Essentially, if we have a game that promises all-out action, slow-mo dives, and wicked kill cams, then the expectation is that the player better get all that ASAP. Starting a game with a 20-minute introductory cutscene will serve to pull the player out of the experience, as will a section divorced from the meat of the game. A player has to be pleased on many fronts, with story usually drawing the short straw. The actual mechanics of the game are used to draw a player in, rather than the character's motivations. Of course, this isn't always the case, and I'd like to now praise a game that manages to weave together its mechanics and story in such a way that loss is felt. They capture that feeling, the essence. That game is Pyre. Pyre is a hybrid of sorts. Ostensibly a party RPG about ritualistic basketball, Supergiant Games bring their penchant for world building and fuse it together with a fun and colourful cast before finishing it off with a sports-based bow. The rights themselves are serviceable, though the game treads a wobbly line between real-time and turn-based, with no AI for the other members of your three-man team. They just stay static when not directly controlled. In theory, this should lead to deft switches on the fly, creating openings with one character before passing off the ball to exploit them. Or, if you're me, completely ignoring my other teammates while dashing madly around the pitch as fast as my little legs carry me, darting into any opportunities that present themselves. Path of least resistance and all that jazz. Later on, there is a difficulty modifier which ups the ante, forcing you to engage with, tactics. And this feels like it should have maybe been the baseline setting. Anyway, enough griping and onto the more interesting bits. The real joy of the game comes through how these rights are fused into the backbone of the story, and it's here that I'll place my customary spoiler warning. I won't be spoiling any of the endings of Pyre, but one of the major plot points along the way will be revealed, so please, if the game seems like your cup of tea, please go play it. I'll wait. Boy, that was fast. Well done. So let's get down to it, shall we? The story goes a little something like this. Cast down into essentially prison world, you become a reader, essentially a basketball team manager, for the legendary Nightwings, or at least their current roster. You guide them through a tournament, picking up new characters and chatting along the way. Eventually, you reach the finals, with the grand prize being a pardon and reversal of exiling for one of your team. But, and here's the kicker, only one of your most leveled up characters can be pardoned, and you'll never see them again. This is brilliant. It ensures the maximum impact of this choice and the loss which follows. The characters whose movesets and playstyles you favoured, or the ones you've chosen again and again because you love their character, Rookie, I'm looking at you, and your moustache. These characters are the ones who must be given up. And this doesn't only happen once, oh no. The process repeats again and again. New tournaments and pardons slowly drain your stock of players. This makes the loss hit you in two ways. Both mechanically, as you have to learn how to use characters you cast an area glance at before, and narratively, as those you choose for pardoning essentially exit the story stage left with only letters and post-credit flashcards to let you know where they are now. Of course, should your opponents win the tournament, one of their team gets the chance to leave. You keep your roster, and so that feeling of loss isn't there, but the game throws another element into the mix. You are privy to the hopes and dreams of the other teams. Through pre-match conversations, you untangle their relationships and might even make the choice to let them win. And I'd argue here that it is a choice, since as previously stated, the game's not overly taxing. And there's always save scumming. Huzzah for save scumming. The game forms a nebulous network of possible paths and choices, and it's all the more engaging for it. So this is a way to handle loss in video games. Let characters grow through the narrative and provide them with utility to the player. The good old loss double whammy. So that when they're gone, you really feel it. That was why, Final Fantasy VII spoiler, I guess? Cover your ears. Aerith's death hit so hard for me as a kid. He was a character that had been with you for many hours, who had fought alongside you. A character you had invested time in levelling up and decking out with equipment, and learning her story, just extinguished. Gone. So that's why Pyre was great. Well, alongside its great art, music and writing, and a lesson which other studios would do well to pay attention to in order to fuse a story into the game, rather than just hanging it all on top. A complete package, rather than some sort of skin coat on a mannequin. In a way, I guess you could say this game was inspiring. Inspiring? See what I did there? I'm sorry. Not really.